Good morning, everyone. The webinar will be commencing in just 5 minutes. Since the webinar is going to start in a minute, I request you all to turn your mics and videos off.
Good morning. I welcome everyone present here who took time out of their schedule to attend this webinar on National Education Policy 2020. The NEP 2020, which was approved by the Union Cabinet of India on 29th July, outlines the vision of India's new education system. The policy is a comprehensive framework for elementary education to higher education as well as vocational training. The policy aims to transform India's education system totally by 2030. So, here are the cadets of Tamilnadu Dr. Ambedkar Law University to explain and expound what National Education Policy 2020 is all about. Over to Cadet Mohana Lakshmi to explain about school education.
அனைவருக்கும் வணக்கம். நான் கேடட் மோகன லட்சுமி. கேடில் விடுச்செல்வம், கல்வி ஒருவருக்கு, மாடல்ல மற்றையவை. இந்த குரலுக்கு ஏற்பதாங்க பேச போறேன். அது என்னன்னா, தேசிய கல்விக் கொள்கை, நேஷனல் எஜுகேஷன் பாலிசி 2020. இதுல ஸ்கூல் எஜுகேஷன்ல என்ன சொல்லிருக்காங்க அப்படின்னா, இப்போ படிக்கிறவங்க 90s and 2000s பிறந்தவங்க எல்லாம் எப்படி படிச்சாங்க அப்படின்னா, ப்ரீகேஜி, எல்கேஜி, யூகேஜி எல்லாம் கம்பல்சரி இல்ல. ஸ்ட்ரெயிட்டா they can study first standard. And also ஃபர்ஸ்ட் ஸ்டாண்டர்ட்ல இருந்து 10th ஸ்டாண்டர்ட் வரைக்கும் ஒரே மாதிரியான சப்ஜெக்ட் தான் படிப்பாங்க. அதுவும் ஸ்டேட் போர்ட்ல எல்லாம் தமிழ், இங்கிலீஷ், மேத்ஸ், சயின்ஸ், சோசியல் சயின்ஸ் அந்த மாதிரி சப்ஜெக்ட்ஸ் தான் படிப்பாங்க. முன்னால நம்ம ஃபர்ஸ்ட் ஸ்டாண்டர்ட் டு 10th ஸ்டாண்டர்ட் வரைக்கும் சேம் சப்ஜெக்ட் தான் படிப்போம். ஆஃப்டர் போர்டு எக்ஸாம் +1 +2ல நம்மளுக்கு பிடிச்ச குரூப்ஸ் சூஸ் பண்ணி படிப்போம். இது பழைய சிஸ்டம். இந்த சிஸ்டம்க்கு பேரு 10+2 சிஸ்டம் அப்படின்னு இருந்துச்சு. கவர்மெண்ட் என்ன சொல்லியிருந்தாங்கன்னா, இந்தியாவில் இருக்கிற எல்லா ஸ்டூடெண்ட்டும் 6 years ஆஃப் ஏஜ்ல இருந்து படிச்சிருக்கணும். பட் இந்த நியூ சிஸ்டம்ல 3 yearsல இருந்தே படிச்சிருக்கணும் கம்பல்சரியா அப்படின்னு சொல்லியிருக்காங்க. தட் இஸ் ப்ரீகேஜி, எல்கேஜி, யூகேஜி இஸ் கம்பல்சரி. இது எல்லாமே ஃப்ரீ அண்ட் ஃபேர் எஜுகேஷன். அதாவது ஏழை பணக்காரன் என்ற ஏற்றத்தாழ்வு இல்லாம எல்லாரும் ஒரே மாதிரியான கல்வி. பிஃபோர் திஸ் பாலிசி 10+2 சிஸ்டம் அப்படின்னு தான் இருந்துச்சு. இப்போ 5+3+3+4 அப்படின்னு மாறி போச்சு. இது எப்படின்னா, ஒரு ஸ்டூடெண்ட் 5 years ஆஃப் ஏஜ்குள்ள ப்ரீ ஸ்கூல்ல கம்ப்ளீட் பண்ணிருக்கணும். அந்த ஸ்டூடெண்டோட 6th ஏஜ்ல அவன் ஃபர்ஸ்ட் ஸ்டாண்டர்ட் படிப்பான். செகண்ட் ஸ்டாண்டர்ட் முடிச்சதும் அவனோட சப்ஜெக்ட்ஸ்ல ஸ்லைட் சேஞ்சஸ் இருக்கும். while he is coming to 6th standard totally different subjects இருக்கும். இப்போ வெளிநாட்டுல உள்ள ஒரு 6th ஸ்டாண்டர்ட் படிக்கிற ஸ்டூடெண்ட் கிட்ட கேட்டா, அவங்களுக்கு பிடிச்ச சப்ஜெக்டுக்கு ரிலேட்டடா கேட்டா அவங்க ஆன்சர் பண்ணுவாங்க. பட் இந்தியால அந்த மாதிரி நடக்காது. ஏன்னா எல்லாரும் ஒரே மாதிரியான சப்ஜெக்ட்ஸ் தான் படிச்சுட்டு இருக்கோம். சோ இதை மாத்தணும்னு தான் இந்த பாலிசி. அதை மாத்துறதுக்காக 6th ஸ்டாண்டர்ட் படிக்கும் போதே அவங்களுக்கு பிடிச்ச சப்ஜெக்ட அவங்களே சூஸ் பண்ணி படிக்கலாம். சின்ன ஏஜ்ல இருந்தே அவங்களுக்கு பிடிச்சது என்ன அப்படின்னு தெரிஞ்சு படிக்கலாம். இதெல்லாம் இந்த பாலிசியில கொண்டு வரதுக்கு ஒரு காரணம் இருக்கு. லிட்ரஸி ரேட்டை இன்க்ரீஸ் பண்றதுக்காக தான் கொண்டு வராங்க. ஸோ 2025ல எல்லா மாணவனுமே ப்ரீ பிரைமரி ஸ்கூல்ல கம்பல்சரியா படிச்சிருக்கணும். நெக்ஸ்ட், யூனிவர்சல் ஆக்சஸ் டு எஜுகேஷன். இது என்னன்னா, எல்லாராலையும் ஃப்ரீயா கல்வி கற்க முடியும். அப்புறம் கவர்மெண்ட் அண்ட் பிரைவேட் ஸ்கூல்ஸ்ல எல்லாம் தரமான இலவசமான கல்வி அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டாங்க. தென் 5+3+3+4 என்ன? ஒரு மாணவனோ ஒரு மாணவியோ ஃபர்ஸ்ட் 3 yearsல ப்ரீ ஸ்டேஜ் படிப்பாங்க. செகண்ட் அண்ட் ஃபர்ஸ்ட் ஸ்டாண்டர்ட் ஃபவுண்டேஷனல் ஸ்டேஜ். தேர்ட், ஃபோர்த், ஃபிஃப்த் ப்ரிப்பரேட்டரி ஸ்டேஜ். லோக்கல் லாங்குவேஜ் அண்ட் மதர் லாங்குவேஜ். அதாவது 5th ஸ்டாண்டர்ட் வரைக்குமே ஒரு ஸ்டூடெண்ட் அவங்களோட மதர் டங்க்ல தான் படிக்கணும். அண்ட் அவங்க கம்பல்சரியா 3 லாங்குவேஜஸ் படிச்சிருக்கணும். ஃபார் எக்ஸாம்பிள் தமிழ், இங்கிலீஷ், ஹிந்தி. அண்ட் 6th to 8th ஸ்டாண்டர்ட்குள்ள ஏதாச்சும் ஒரு சப்ஜெக்ட்ல அவங்க லாங்குவேஜை பத்தி அவங்க படிச்சிருக்கணும். மெயின்லி இது எல்லாமே ஆர்டிபிஷியல் இன்டெலிஜென்ஸை யூஸ் பண்ணி தான் கொண்டு வந்திருக்காங்க. அதாவது கல்வியை மாடர்னா கொண்டு வந்திருக்காங்க. இதெல்லாம் எதுக்கு அப்படின்னு பார்த்தா, இந்தியாவில உள்ள எல்லா ஸ்டூடெண்ட்டுமே 12th வரைக்கும் கம்பல்சரியா எஜுகேட்டடா இருக்கணும். இது ரொம்ப ரொம்ப யூஸ்ஃபுல்லான பாலிசி. இது ஒரு நல்ல டெசிஷனும் கூட. கடைசியா ஒரு திருக்குறளோட முடிச்சுக்கலாம். என்னென்ப ஏன எழுத்தென்ப இவ்விரண்டும் கண்ணென்ப வாழும் உயிர்க்கு. இக்குறளுக்கு ஏற்றவாறு அனைவரும் கல்வி பயில்வோம் மற்றும் கல்வி கற்போமாக. Over to my co-cadet Amrith to explain about proposed curriculum changes of NEP.
Let us now look into the proposed changes and reforms in school education as far as curriculum and pedagogy are concerned. The policy states that learning should be holistic, integrated, enjoyable, and engaging. What exactly does holistic development mean? Proper manifestation of knowledge, which is a deep-seated treasure within an individual, would result in perfection of education. Holistic learning means doing away with the culture of rote learning as is largely present today. We all are familiar with the words called mug up and by heart. Holistic learning is the exact opposite of the same. It means a cognitive development, building character, and creating a well-rounded individual who is equipped with key 21st century skills. And these skills are to be identified by the NCERT. Holistic development also means to reduce curriculum content in such a way that only core essentials, key concepts, ideas, applications, and problem solving is included in the curriculum. Teaching learning processes, which is called as pedagogy, should be in a more interactive manner, and question and answers will be encouraged for a deeper and more experiential learning. Students will be given a greater flexible opportunity in selecting subjects, particularly in their secondary school. That means
Friendly factor also contributes to the increasing stress for the higher education institution. Over to my co-captain Sindhana and Aandavan to continue further on the key points of the policy.
I will be giving a short overview on the other key areas of focus in the National Education Policy 2020. Apart from school education and higher education, NEP throws light on adult education and online education. Firstly, adult education. We are struggling to ensure basic education to even the children. If that's the case, then how can we make adults who haven't touched a book their entire life to study? That is the challenge of adult education. NEP has addressed the same in the following ways. Firstly, what to study. We don't yet have a curriculum for adult education. NCERT is set now to prepare it along with books. Secondly, where to study. Infrastructural needs have to be addressed, right? Schools after school hours or at weekends are to be used for adult education. Thirdly, who will teach? Volunteers, preferably within the community, are trained by governmental institutions for teaching adults. Finally, how to study. The curriculum is fine, but books, adults should have access to books in hand to read and learn. Schools, colleges, and public libraries are modernized and strengthened to ensure this. Another area of focus in NEP 2020 to be touched upon today is online education. New situations necessitate new initiatives. We weren't allowed to bring phones to class, but today we brought classes into phones. We are trying to not let COVID break our learning process. Now, this is Estonia. Education here continued uninterrupted even in this pandemic as the country digitalized its education way before. Given the fact that India is a very large country compared to Estonia, this achievement for sure will take time. But the good news is we are already in the path towards it. And when we are ready to embrace online education and induct it into our system, we should also minimize its negatives. The same is focused in NEP. Online education should not become boring screen-staring sessions. They should be interactive. Teachers should be trained to become online educators. Great teachers in traditional classrooms may not be so good at teaching online. Then, e-platforms like Swayam and Diksha are created, which have lectures, study materials, virtual labs, and whatnot. They are free and open to everyone. Obviously, accessibility problem has to be addressed. So many students out there don't even have a phone. For them, TV, radio, and other mass media are broadcasting the lecture videos 24/7 class-wise. On the whole, NEP 2020 has attempted to cover all areas of education with necessary improvements and suggestions. Over to Cadet Gireeshvaran to bring in a contrast between the education policies of 1986 and 2020.
National Education Policy 2020 versus 1986. Post-independence, India has had three education policies. The first policy was formulated in 1968, in which major emphasis was on compulsory education for children up to the age of 14. Next, the second NEP was introduced in 1986. The major emphasis was to remove the disparity between various social groups, while the 1986 policy emphasized on achieving uniformity of education across social groups. It did not account for the competitive global landscape which became important with the beginning of globalization of Indian economy post its 1991 reforms. Now, the NEP 2020 is an attempt to balance both local and global human resource to the needs of a growing Indian economy. This segment will explain the fundamental differences between the education policy of 1986, which was in use, and the new policy. At a strategic level, the differences in both the policies are primarily around three major dimensions, namely vision of the society, social purpose, and purpose of education. Both the education policies were developed keeping in mind the structure of society. In a way, the policy of 1986 and 2020 have a vividly distinct, clear idea of an Indian society and are aptly based to match and fill up the needs and voids in the society that are to be covered up with education. In the 1980s, world economies were largely local and some were in transient phase. Comparatively, the world economies today are operating as complex global entities. In the view of the same, the 1986 NEP focused on standardization and equal opportunities to all. Given that in 2020, most of the organizations have reached maturity, have critical inertia. The NEP 2020 focuses on augmenting individual capacity and achieving high excellence in the field of your choice by providing customizable options for education while hoping to reduce the regulation via provision of more internal autonomy to the institutions. This is evident from the reducing number of educational regulators to one and from the fact that new NEP 2020 will facilitate subject selection, software training in schools, transfer of credit system, multiple entries and exit systems. The second point of difference is with the respect to social purpose. The NEP 1986 was geared towards providing standard educational opportunities to various social groups. Therefore, its primary purpose was largely centered on the inclusion of disadvantaged groups. While the NEP 2020 retains the focus on social inclusivity, it also hopes for creation of special education zones in the areas having a significant proportion of disadvantaged groups. Additionally, NEP 2020 focuses on the economic value arising out of educational learning and training. The NEP 2020 has a significant focus on skill-based learning and employability arising out of the same. This is evident from the increased focus on providing technical skills at various levels to those seeking secondary and post-secondary education. Thirdly, the difference lies in their understanding of the aims of education. The earlier policy stressed more about understanding the world and human life. According to NEP 1986, the aim of the education is threefold, namely the overall development of the human resource, international cooperation and peaceful coexistence, development of socialism, secularism and democracy. The present policy focused more on national development by creating citizens with knowledge, skills and individual development. Specifically, the aim of education as defined by NEP 2020 is to achieve full human potential, development of a just and equitable society, and promoting national development. The curriculum in the new policy is more inclined to allow for critical thinking, discussions, and analytical learning, which aims to enrich India's talent and human resource pool. And the same can be viewed as a solution of India's long discussed Achilles heel of employability of engineers. Overall, the NEP 1986 created a pool of educated and trained human resource who contributed to the value chain. But the NEP 2020 dreams of creating human resource who will create value propositions. With the implementation of the new NEP 2020, the Indian education system is poised to become closer to international standards. Over to my co-cadet, Yuvashree Prathiksha, to explain about making it happen.
A very pleasant morning to one and all present here. This is
Cadet Yuvashree, and I am here to explain about the steps undertaken by the government to enforce the National Education Policy 2020. The topic making it happen covers two major areas where reforms are needed. The policy focuses on strengthening the Central Advisory Board of Education and providing affordable and high quality education for all, regardless of what background the students come from. Strengthening and empowering the Central Advisory Board of Education will have a much greater impact in the educational sector. And not only that, it will also be helpful in dealing with issues relating to educational and cultural development. Among the other things, the NEP has also renamed the Ministry of Human Resource Development as the Ministry of Education, which is a great sign of the country's changing focus on education. The policy aims at raising the educational investment. It has also planned to provide financial support and increase the public investment in education, which would help in providing high quality education for our young people. Unfortunately, the public expenditure on education in India has not come close to the recommended level of 6% of GDP. According to the Analysis Budget Expenditure 2017-18, the public expenditure on education in India has been around 4.43%. And as per Economic Survey of 2017-18, only 10% of government spending is done towards education. In order to attain the goal of education with excellence, this policy visualizes a solid increase in public investment in education, which is done by both the central and the state governments. Gender Inclusion Fund is one such example. This fund aims at providing affordable and equitable quality education for all girls and transgender students. The policy has also listed out some long-term areas for financing, such as universal access, nutritional support, teacher development, and so on. So all these would help in effective and efficient working of this policy. The financial governance and management focuses on appropriate flow and proper usage of funds. Suitable and necessary amendments in administrative processes are also done. So it also aims to make efficient and effective usage of the resources provided by the government. And finally, it seeks to avoid parking of funds. And now, a question may arise on how the government is going to deal with commercialization of education. The policy uses multiple ideas such as the light but tight regulatory approach in order to deal with commercialization of education. This approach orders full disclosure of finances, procedures, and investment in public education. It also aims at maintaining good governance over all educational institutions. The policy suggests that all these reforms would surely make a great change in the current educational system and also would help the younger generations to get affordable and high quality education. Over to my co-cadet, Vinodha Sabattini, to share her views on salient features and way forward of NEP 2020.
In life, there are simple and important things. Simple as me and important as you. Thank you everyone for spending your precious time in attending the webinar. I'm Cadetess Vinodha Sabattini. Finally, India's 73rd and 74th years of independence and the national education policy coincide with this pandemic year, which is responsible for overhauling how we perceive and how we experience the world around us. The NEP 2020 aims at making India a global knowledge superpower. The NEP cleared by the cabinet is only the third major revamp of the framework to the Indian education since independence. I'm here to unfold the salient futures and the way forward of NEP 2020. Now, let us pursue the subject to the salient futures. The salient futures are the objectives of the announced NEP, apart from what is clearly evident in its documentation and which are in perfect harmony with the government's initiative in India. Well, we all know about self-reliant India, but how is it connected to NEP? That is, how it became the key feature of NEP. Let me read out the theme. The first objective of the NEP is to devise and implement robust solutions to the initiatives of the Indian government like Make in India, Startup India, and the latest being Atmanirbhar India. The related regulatory body called National Committee for the Integration of Vocational Education will be constituted to set the framework. Sustainable Development Goals. The United Nations defined 17 Sustainable Development Goals as a well-defined tool in 2015. Article 7.12 talks of constituting Samajik Chetna Kendra that will include activities for the society and provide social cohesive environment at schools. Education as the economic booster. GDP of about 6% is to be invested for achieving these goals. Since knowledge economy is interrelated to the society, this brings multitudes of socio-economic improvements. Also, the stress on vocational studies and the support through funding reinforce in boosting the economy. Internationalization of higher education. Wait, we may feel something here. Many people have questioned that how can we allow the foreign universities to land on India? But the thing is, internationalization targets on creating India as a knowledge hub, attracting foreign nationals, and to promote student exchanges between Indian and the global institutions. Exchange of credits between foreign universities and the home institutions will be permitted. Digital education and classrooms. The initiative of the Digital India and the current crisis of this pandemic have been the motive behind the need and the creation of digital libraries, digital content, classrooms, and the online teaching. The National Educational Technology Forum is proposed to facilitate decision-making on the deployment and the use of technology. A layered accreditation system. This will differentiate between a degree-granting standalone university and a wholesome university. Affiliation system is to be stopped, and teaching and research forms the two major activities in an institution. Equipping teachers with the latest technology. It mentions higher remuneration for the teachers to attract best talents to the industry. Also, the main development is introducing courses in education via BEd and a mandatory certified education during PhD enrollment for the aspiring professors. Now, let us move on to the way forward. The NEP must make specific, time-bound and measurable commitments linked with the accountability about funding and expenditure with regard to this grand vision. It has to keep children and parents at the center of implementation plans, and it should provide choice not just in letter but also in spirit. The policy must also incorporate the common school system, which will ensure equal opportunities for all. Currently, India spends around 4.6% of its total GDP on education. Part 4 of the Indian Constitution, that is Article 39F and Article 45 of the Directive Principles of State Policy, has a provision for the state-funded as well as equitable and accessible education. Also, the 86th Amendment to the Indian Constitution in 2002 inserted Article 21A, Right to Education, as a fundamental right in Part 3 of the Constitution for the children between 6 to 14 years. NEP is a progressive shift towards a more scientific approach to the education. In a nutshell, the prescribed structure will help to cater the ability of the child as well as social and physical awareness. If implemented in its true version, the new structure can bring India at par with the leading countries of the world. I once again thank everyone for sensing my views. Over to my co-cadet Amrith to conclude the session.
The National Education Policy of 2020 is radically progressive in nature. It has point-specific and focused progressive changes when compared to NEP 1986. The changes that the policy have suggested would surely make a great change in the current education system and would help the younger generations to get an affordable and high-quality education. Achieving foundational literacy and numeracy would take Indian education to historic heights. With the principles of equity and inclusion in its forefront, the NEP 2020 would bring the socially and economically backward classes people into the mainstream society. The NEP has rightly addressed and bridged the challenges in providing adult education right from curriculum to infrastructure. The positive influence of technology on professional education has also been analyzed, and their flaws are also rectified sector-wise. Online education, which has gained spotlight today during the COVID-19 pandemic, and its disadvantages have also been addressed in the policy. The salient features of the NEP 2020 is clearly evident in its documentation and are in perfect harmony with the government's previous initiatives since 2014. The NEP 2020, therefore, aims to bring transformative changes in every single sector of education. The policy is comprehensive and holistic, and let us all, as responsible NCC cadets, make sure that the policy is implemented to have literate and holistically educated Indians. On behalf of the Tamilnadu Dr. Ambedkar Law University NCC, I thank each and every one of you for joining us for today's webinar. The webinar is now open for question and answer sessions. You can unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can post it in the chat box. Seeing that no question has been posted yet, I would like to thank each and every one of you again for joining us today. I would like to inform that today was part 1 of the National Education Policies webinar. Part 2 of the webinar is also being organized. The date and time would be intimated in due course. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you everyone for joining us in this webinar. And to review this session, you can visit our YouTube page, and also you can also keep in touch with us for further sessions and informations with our Instagram account too. The links have been shared in the chat box. Thank you for spending your valuable time for this webinar. I hope it was a very informative session. Thank you so much, everyone.